Alright guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Big roster developments continue last night. Rumour has it Cloud9 have fully locked in their entire roster, and further discussion that that OMIT team that knocked FaZe out of the World Cup now has pretty much all of their players in the Pro League for next season, but seemingly not every single one. A big omission at least so far. ZooMaa does not believe as a result any of these CDL teams at the bottom of the league really know what they are doing, and with Cloud9 potentially locking in this roster, what will the Ravens do if they even stay as that for the upcoming season? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Thought it was funny just to start here because people have been beefing with the Battlefield scene over the last few days. It's a month today until the new Call of Duty Black Ops 7 is meant to come out. I know that Scump was talking about it, the progression system is too slow and all this stuff. I just thought it's pretty funny because every single tweet that is done about Battlefield from a COD player, there's a load of replies, obviously roasting them for being a Call of Duty kid and all this. So I thought it was all pretty funny, and again, a number of tweets to this effect. Hitch even decided that he would, let's say, stir the pot or poke the bear, whatever you want to say, and say that these are the things that would make Battlefield 6 a better game, or actually he says a good game would be, and he lists about 15 things that need to change, and understandably he got 100, times 4 responses of people telling him exactly where he should be going. But Scump did mention, speaking of BO7 really, when the game should launch, because we talked about it yesterday, I think, that Black Ops 4 came out already, right? Back in 18? God, feels a long time ago. Back in 2018 when Black Ops 4 came out, it was an October release, an early October release, October the 12th or something. That game came out back then. Now, of course, most CODs were in, I think back in the day used to be like 11th of November, 9th of November, something around that kind of time. Second Friday of November was typically when the game would come out. Now, could we have the first Friday of November on the 7th this time around? That would better align with when it's historically come out. And let's be honest, the game is basically ready to go, right? Like, what's going to change between the beta and the full release? Probably not much at all. And it's okay if it comes out a little later, but it was just generally better for the scene if it comes out earlier, right? Because it means that we can get cracking already in some online tournaments. We can get some matches going as well. We can get the pros to figure out what maps they want to play, and then the CDL can decide to listen to them or not, what the weapon meta is going to look like, and also for the developers to fix some of the inevitable issues in the game. When the game drops, there's always a few things that need tweaking, that need looking at, and the longer time frame there is, you want to balance there, right? Because you don't necessarily want to start the CDL on day one of the game releasing. It would be a bit of a mess. But you don't want to wait too long, because otherwise the interest dies down. 2-3 weeks is a pretty decent time frame. That's probably what we're going to get, to be honest, if the CDL does start with online matches in the early part of December and the game launches on the 14th. But we've had a pretty long off-season already, and the fact that there's a month to go until the game launches, when over the last few years it's not necessarily launched that late, as Scump says, you know what, why not bring it back another week? Could that be a good idea for everyone? We'll see what they decide to do. There was also this they talked about. So at the end of the beta, they say that 99% of matches were cheater-free by the end of the beta. The median time to identify cheaters reduced to just under 3 matches. So look, if we believe that Ricochet actually works now and that anti-cheat is actually proper in Call of Duty, I'm not holding up too much hope. We've had lots of false dawns over the last couple of years. But it is worth pointing out that they say that things are a lot better now. Ricochet's actually working, cheaters are getting caught on a far swifter basis. And it is a shame that this is a selling point, but it is a fair selling point because other games also suffer from similar things. And I think many of us have said, okay, like Black Ops 7 sounds great, but if ranked is still infested by cheaters, especially at the top levels, then it's pointless, right? And I think that is also worth keeping in mind that, yes, okay, maybe 99% of matches have no cheaters in, but also those cheaters will be represented on a higher percentage at the top levels, right? So the pros, the top challengers players playing ranked, for example, those lobbies will be featuring cheaters at a higher rate just because the cheaters are going to end up being at a higher rank, right? So, you will get that kind of discrepancy there, but probably the lower ranks should feature no real cheaters at all if this is true. And even then, at the very top level, hopefully it should be a smaller issue than it has been in the past. So They're giving that as a selling point. They're making a whole graphic about it. Whether we buy it, I guess we'll see on this one. But let's talk about what's happening with some of these, well, teams, right? ZooMaa's been giving his thoughts on a lot over the last few days, and especially on this roster. So, we talked about this a couple of days ago. Beans and Afro locked in contracts, it seems, with Cloud9. Now, Viper came up with this idea of pairing them with Mac and Vivid. I thought that seemed like a pretty reasonable way to go as well, and apparently that is what Arian and Marky B are looking to do. So this is your team before, and it's a very interesting team before compared to some of the other teams that we've seen built over the last few days. We've got that Minnesota Rokkr team of SGL, Kremp, Skies, and Mamba rounding out that team. We've got that Surge team with Legend, apparently Gwyn, Abe, and Lunas rounding out that roster. So, you know, some interesting teams getting formed, some that are questionable, some that definitely have upside. This is also, I think, an attempt to bring in some of those Omit guys that were so strong at the end of the season and pair them as follows. Now, this is what Ronnie has to say, as we'll discuss here in the article. Cloud9 New York is entering a full rebuild because, look, New York were a competitive franchise every single year with the CDL, pretty much until C9 took over. Last year wasn't great, and they had some big name players on that team last season, but they crashed and burned pretty hard. We also understand, at least according to Methods, who made up the rumours, that they ain't paying much money, right? Pretty much poverty org status. They're here for the World Cup bag, effectively, and that's the strategy maybe every single year at this point. So, Beans and Afro coming in. Now, there will be big questions about this. I think there's questions about a number of aspects of this team. I think Beans, to me, was a little underwhelming last year on Toronto. Some would argue that he was still better than Insight, and I think you can make that argument as well. But I do think that he's very talented and he shoots straight, right? And on his day, he does drop a lot of damage. He might not make the best decisions all the time, but I think that if I was building a team, Beans would absolutely be an AR that I'd be looking at. Afro, there are certainly going to be questions on him. Last time he was in the league was on LA Thieves in Modern Warfare 3 at the start. He was in, then he was out, then he was in again, and then he was out again, and then it was kind of all over for his future, it looks like, despite an incredibly promising start to his time in the CDL. Early in Cold War, when he first came in, this guy looked like, you know, his talent was really up there, and I still believe that it is. In Black Ops 6, for example, yeah, he was in challenges, but he was absolutely crushing it pretty much all year. And I believe he's a player kind of like Neptune who deserves another shot. Not to say that Afro will come in and do what Neptune did last season, but considering where Neptune was as a pro during the majority of his time in the CDL compared to where he was last year, I think you can definitely see the arguments for giving players like Afro another shot, and I'm on board with giving it a go as well. Now, rounding out the team with Mac and Vivid is very interesting. I did mention this when it comes to Rokkr, right? There was lots of talk that maybe they should have got Mamba and Craze as a duo. They were the duo on Omit, and then Mac and Vivid were like the other duo on Omit at the end of the season, right? Now, we know what happens with Vivid. If you drop him, your team gets worse. And Mac also has some upside as a player. Now, look, Vivid and Mac, is that going to massively turn heads as a duo? Not necessarily, but are they a solid, fundamental duo that are going to play at some pace? I mean, I did mention it, right? Beans, Afro, Mac and Vivid. It's going to be a seriously fast-paced team, especially because who's even going to run the flex, right? Is it going to be Mac? Is it going to be Vivid? Afro's going to be on a sub for sure. I think, who do you pair him with? I think I would put Vivid on the sub. I would have Vivid and Afro on my SMGs, Mac on the flex. He was so good at that back in MW19, and then Beans on effectively like my main AR. But, you know, you've got to rely on Beans therefore being a bit more fundamental than maybe he has been before. But I do see the vision to a certain extent. Now, some would look at this team and say, damn, they are going to get slammed. And I can understand that opinion as well. And maybe Ravens, as the only team that hasn't done anything yet, can still form a better roster than this. But I do understand where Cloud9 are coming from here. I don't think it's absolutely terrible, for sure. And I do think it's a roster that could be what you might consider to be greater than the sum of their parts. They could be a little bit of a Boston vibe. And at least they've got something of that Omit team that did prove to be pretty successful. But I think you could also make the argument that, well, you know, Beans and Afro, is that better than Mamba and Craze? Could you just brought the entire quartet over and call it a day? I understand why they haven't done that. ZooMaa gives his opinion. He's not particularly convinced that this roster is a good idea. There's some other speculations in here as well, especially what the Ravens are going to cook up as, what, the last team to do anything in this roster mania period as always.
Cloud9 roster's not it. All right, ReeaL. We got MC. We got Kismet. AG and XNIT. We obviously got Traixx, MettalZ, Super, and ReeaL here at Miami. We got Estriel, Geo, Kremp, and Skies at Minnesota Rokkr. I don't know if I'm feeling that team either, to be honest with you. Snoopy, Cammy, Nastie, and Purj for Boston. It's good. I just thought they were gonna do more, but it's good. You know, it's good. I do like Nastie getting on a team. You know, it's not bad. Carolina Ravens. We got Nero, Mamba, Craze, and Slasher. And in Vancouver, we got Gwyn, Lunars, Abe, and Legend. I don't know. Is this Carolina team? I don't know if this Carolina team is definite here. This Nero, Craze, Mamba, and Slasher. I don't think this is a team. This isn't right? I don't think this is right, chat. CDL teams. Wow. This is crazy, chat. This is crazy. How is Craze not on a team? How is he not on a team? How does that make any sense? Same with Nero. I mean, Nero's a great player as well. But Craze is like, Nero's been around. Like, I think some people might have just seen Nero enough. I think Nero's a great player. Bro, Nero, I think Nero's going to have a field day in Challengers, to be honest with you. I said that yesterday. I think Nero's going to go crazy in Challengers and just pop the fuck off. You know? But I say Craze because Craze was like a hot commodity. Like, bro, like this guy was actually performing. They took down Atlanta FaZe at EWC. Craze has been performing in challenges. He performed on the big stage. Like, I thought people would want to take a risk on Craze because he's kind of like a new guy in the street, you know? But to see that nobody's taking a risk on him, like, I'm going to be honest, it just kind of questions, like, what these teams are doing a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you, bro. I'm going to be honest.
So Parasite did that tweet, no Nero or Craze on CDL teams, seemingly saying, like, you know, what are these clowns playing at, right? Jake Hell, though, says, not what I heard. So this is interesting. Mamba, we think, is going to the Rokkr. Could they have brought Craze along as well? Look, Craze was great at the World Cup. I mean, I did find up some of the lineman cards here. These were, okay, it's only the World Cup, but these were the World Cup lineman cards, and Craze had a 94 lineman card. These were his numbers across all the different game modes, incredibly consistent, very impactful indeed. So it is a bit of a surprise, I mean maybe more than a bit of a surprise, to see that the players who had the weaker lineman cards, Mac with an 86, and yeah, it's a lineman card. You know, Mamba had an 83, Vivid had a 79, and these are all the respective numbers there. But all of those guys getting picked up. Mamba to Rokkr, the other two we think to Cloud9. Craze, who had the best performance theoretically on that roster, not getting signed as yet. And the implication from Parasite is that that's not going to be happening. But Jake Hale basically says, like, that's not what I heard. Craze is getting a spot. And if he's getting a spot, it's got to be on the Ravens, right? Where else can it possibly be? As I keep saying, is it still even going to be the Ravens? I don't know. Right now, we don't know. I mean, we thought it was going to be Space Station. They've not said anything. They've not done anything. They've not tweeted anything. It's a classic, right, from that organisation. But there will be a roster there somewhere as that 12th CDL team. And Parasite says that there's going to be no Nero or Craze. Maybe again, Parasite's let's say sources aren't up to speed, and Jake Hale implies anyway that at least one of these two, maybe both of these two, are probably going to end up on that Ravens roster. So I think that's probably my question for you now is, can Ravens do a better job than Cloud9 have just done, right? Because we know that Surge are taking a big risk with Abe, Lunars, Legend, and Gwyn. There's a lot of upside there. There's a lot of kind of crash and burn potential. Rokkr are doing very much classic Rokkr things. And then Cloud9 had the opportunity to go and build their roster, Mac, Vivid, Beans, and Afro. Is it possible to do better than that with the players that are still remaining, right? Can Ravens come in now and form a better team than Cloud9 have just done? I think that's an interesting question. If they start with Craze, which they probably will, I know that ZooMaa's talked about it here, maybe not happening, but I think it's pretty likely, isn't it, really, that Craze gets picked up there. Do they keep Slasher as the main? Do they bring TJ Halley back? And then, as obviously Parasite was also suggesting, what do you do with Nero? Does Nero come back in? Absolutely, in terms of talent, CDL level, but I can understand the skepticism around Nero given recent seasons and, let's say, converting that clear raw gunny into actual results. And I think a similar story maybe for Geo, for example. I'm sure that Nero and Geo must feel a certain type of way about Estriel staying on Rokkr, Kenny getting picked up to Thieves, and then potentially not even having a spot after what happened on G2 Rokkr last season. I don't know so much about that. But pretty much the conclusion is that not all of these guys can get a spot, right? Like many of the names that I've just mentioned. And maybe they will go down an entirely different route, Ravens. Or if it is Space Station, they might want to consider some of the other Halo guys as well. They will take their time. They will bide their time, because the longer they wait, the less quickly they have to start paying salaries. And we know that for many of these organizations, that becomes particularly relevant. So very much on Twitter your thoughts, as always, and all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.